In 1200 BC, the world was thriving. The Egyptians were building monuments, the Greeks were constructing palaces, the Hittites controlled a vast empire. International trade connected civilizations from Afghanistan to Spain. Kings exchanged gifts, signed treaties, and married each other's daughters. It was the first globalized world, interconnected, prosperous, unstoppable. 50 years later, almost all of it was gone. Cities that had stood for centuries burned to the ground. Entire civilizations vanished. Writing systems were forgotten. Trade routes that had operated for generations went silent. Populations scattered into the wilderness. And here's what's terrifying. We still don't fully know why. The Bronze Age collapse is the greatest civilizational catastrophe in human history that most people have never heard of. Multiple empires fell simultaneously within a single lifetime. The Mediterranean world wouldn't recover for 400 years. What happened, and why does it matter right now? This file needs to be opened. To understand the collapse, you need to understand what was lost. The Late Bronze Age, roughly 1500 to 1200 BC, was remarkable. 4 great powers dominated the known world: Egypt, the Hittites, Assyria, and Babylon. Around them, smaller kingdoms thrived: Mycenaean Greece, Cyprus, Ugarit, the Canaanite cities. They weren't isolated, they were interconnected in ways that feel surprisingly modern. Diplomatic letters found in Egypt, called the Amarna letters, show kings addressing each other as brother. They negotiated treaties, they complained about trade disputes, they requested physicians, craftsmen, and exotic goods from distant lands. The economy was globalized. Tin from Afghanistan mixed with copper from Cyprus to create bronze, the defining technology of the age. Disrupt any link in that chain and weapons couldn't be made. A drought in one region affected prices everywhere. A war in Anatolia disrupted shipping in Egypt. This system worked beautifully for 3 centuries. Then, around 1200 BC, everything started to unravel. The end came fast. Around 1200 BC, the Hittite Empire, one of the most powerful states in the ancient world, collapsed completely. Their capital, Hattusa, was burned and abandoned. The empire that had rivaled Egypt simply ceased to exist. Within decades, Mycenaean Greece followed. The great palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos were destroyed. The sophisticated Linear B writing system vanished. Greece plunged into a dark age that lasted 4 centuries. When they emerged, they had forgotten they'd ever had written language. The great trading city of Ugarit, crucial hub connecting east and west, was destroyed around 1185 BC. The last letter ever sent from the city was found in an oven, never delivered. It desperately requested military aid. Help never came. Cyprus devastated, the Canaanite cities destroyed, the Assyrian Empire dramatically weakened. Only Egypt survived, barely, and emerged permanently diminished, never again reaching its former glory. In a single generation, the interconnected Bronze Age world disintegrated. But why? This is where it gets complicated and familiar. Egyptian records mention mysterious invaders called the Sea Peoples, raiders who attacked by land and sea around 1177 BC. Pharaoh Ramesses III fought them off, but just barely. For years, historians blamed the Sea Peoples for everything. But that theory has problems. Who were the Sea Peoples? Where did they come from? The evidence suggests many of them were refugees from already collapsed civilizations. They weren't the cause, they were a symptom. Modern archaeology points to something more disturbing: a perfect storm of simultaneous crises. Climate data shows severe drought struck the eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BC. Harvests failed, famines spread. Hungry populations became desperate. Earthquake evidence suggests a storm of seismic activity hit the region during this period. Multiple cities show destruction consistent with earthquakes. Economic disruption cascaded through the trade networks. When tin supplies from Afghanistan were interrupted, bronze production collapsed. Without bronze, you couldn't make weapons or tools. Internal rebellions erupted as governments failed to manage the crises. Elites lost legitimacy. Social order fractured. No single factor caused the collapse. Everything happened at once. The interconnected system that made the Bronze Age powerful became the very thing that destroyed it. When one part failed, the failures cascaded. Read that list of causes again. Climate change causing agricultural failure, supply chain disruptions, resource scarcity, mass migration, political instability, societies too complex and interconnected to absorb multiple simultaneous shocks. Sound familiar? Historian Eric Klein, who wrote the definitive book on the Bronze Age collapse, makes this explicit. The late Bronze Age civilizations were sophisticated, interconnected, and resilient to individual crises, but they couldn't handle everything hitting at once. We call this systems collapse. It's what happens when complex, interdependent systems face cascading failures that overwhelm their ability to adapt. The Bronze Age world was globalized. One disruption affected everyone. There was no backup system. When trade networks failed, everyone suffered simultaneously. Our world is far more interconnected than theirs. Our supply chains are longer, our systems are more complex, our dependencies are deeper. The Bronze Age civilizations didn't see it coming. They thought their world was permanent, their palaces were strong, their trade networks were stable, their empires had lasted centuries. Until they didn't. The Bronze Age collapse lasted about 50 years. The recovery took 400. 4 centuries of lost knowledge, lost literacy, lost technology, lost population. Entire generations lived in the ruins of civilizations they couldn't understand or rebuild. The Greeks who emerged from the Dark Ages around 800 BC had no memory of the Mycenaean palaces. When they encountered the massive stone walls, they assumed giants must have built them. They called them Cyclopean walls, built by mythical one-eyed monsters. They were looking at their own ancestors' work. They'd forgotten everything. The Bronze Age collapse teaches us something we don't want to hear. Civilization is not inevitable. Progress is not guaranteed. Complex, interconnected systems can collapse catastrophically when multiple crises hit simultaneously. It happened once. It could happen again. The only question is whether we are paying attention. This file remains open. What part of this collapse surprised you most? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see how China survived a dozen collapses while everyone else disappeared, watch this next. The file is waiting.